They left her broken, breathless, and buried beneath steel and silence. Ribs crushed, lungs collapsing. Blood pooling where hope used to live, but when they came back to finish her she was already gone. Gone but not weak. Gone but not done. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. No one expected the girl from the garbage pit to become the one they'd fear in nightmares. It started far from the screaming corridors and underground cages, in the dust-bitten outskirts of Drellholm, where houses leaned like tired souls and hunger carved children hollow. Her name was Kyla Voss, and she was raised on warnings and water from rusted pipes. Her mother disappeared when she was 7, her father disappeared into his fists. What Kyla learned wasn't language or math, it was the rhythm of footsteps in the hallway. She memorized the time between shouts and slaps like scripture. By 14 she was faster than pain. But not fast enough. The night they came, it wasn't her father. It was 3 men with blue bands on their wrists, and no mercy in their eyes. They weren't looking for Kyla, not exactly. They were looking for product. She kicked, bit, screamed so loud a tooth cracked. They laughed, then bagged her like meat. She remembered the smell of the van more than their faces, oil, vomit, and burnt rubber. When she woke up, it wasn't in a room, it was in the hollow, not a place on any map. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A compound stitched underground, guarded by men with night vision and needles. They called it the furnace, because they melted people there, spirit first, then body. Kyla wasn't the only girl. Some prayed, some cried. Kyla watched. She watched who got fed, who got punished, who came back with bruises, who never came back at all. By the second week, she stopped flinching when the door creaked. By the third she started counting guards, exits, and blind spots. She knew her ribs would break before her will, and she was right. One night they dragged her into the metal room, cold as betrayal. One man held her arms. Another made her count each blow. 7, 8 said mine. On the 10th she spat blood, and still smiled. That's when the boss leaned in and said, "Break her lungs too. See if she still smiles." The crack was like thunder inside her chest. She didn't scream, she whispered, "You should have killed me." When they tossed her back in the pit, they thought they had won. They didn't know she had hidden something beneath the floor weeks ago. A tool, stolen during laundry duty. A splintered wrench. Rusted, but sharp. That night, Kyla used it. Not to fight. Not yet. But to dig. To carve a path through filth and wire and concrete. Every breath burned. Every heartbeat stuttered. But she clawed her way through the dirt like it owed her an apology. 6 hours later, her hand broke through to air. She collapsed under the moon, ribs screaming, lungs drowning. But she smiled again. Because she was out. And now she was war. The night wind slapped her face like it hated weakness. She didn't blame it. Kyla crawled out of the hole with blood on her teeth and dirt in her lungs. She was in the woods now, jagged trees and moonlight slicing through like blades. Every breath rattled like broken glass. Every step felt like dragging a corpse that used to be her. But she kept moving. She had to. Behind her the furnace still hummed, a beast unaware its prey had slipped the bars. Her ribs ground against each other. Her right lung fluttered like a flag in a storm. Still, she didn't cry. She used the pain to remember. Every bruise, every laugh they made while she screamed. Every girl who never made it out. She didn't want justice, she wanted return fire. But first, survival. She moved downhill, following the whisper of a stream. Water meant people, people meant risk. But risk was better than dying faceless in the dirt. By sunrise, Kyla collapsed near a rust-covered water tower on the edge of a forgotten farm. A woman found her. Mid-40s. Weathered hands, eyes like sharpened slate. She didn't ask questions. She just carried Kyla inside, wrapped her in old quilts, and poured broth past her cracked lips. Kyla blacked out before she could say thank you. She woke up 2 days later, stitched up and lying next to a radio playing war songs from another era. The woman was already sitting at the foot of the bed, polishing a hunting rifle. "You got lungs full of blood and a spine full of defiance," she said. "You military?" Kyla shook her head. "Then you were somewhere worse." She didn't need to say it aloud. The woman, Ansa Brigg, had seen enough in her time to recognize that kind of damage. Kyla tried to get up. Failed. "Where is this?" she whispered. "Old farm outside Ruthin, miles from anything that makes sense." Kyla smiled through the pain. "Perfect." Ansa didn't press her for details. She just asked one question. "You running, or coming back for revenge?" Kyla didn't answer. She didn't need to. The look in her eyes said it all. Ansa poured whiskey in 2 cups. "To broken ribs and unfinished business," she said. Kyla sipped, coughed blood, smiled again. In the days that followed, Ansa taught her things. How to tape cracked ribs. How to breathe with a punctured lung. How to shoot without moving your core. How to disappear in daylight. Kyla absorbed it all. Not like a student, like a storm getting ready to form. She stayed off the radar. No hospitals. No real names. No contact. But her mind never left the furnace. She began to sketch the layout from memory. Guard rotations. Door codes. Smuggler routes. She remembered every face, every weapon, every weak spot in the wall. Ansa watched her work like someone watching a spark flirt with gasoline. "You planning to go back?" she asked one night. Kyla didn't blink. "I'm not going back. I'm burning it down." That's when Ansa opened the chest in her attic. Inside, blueprints, gear, files from another life. Turns out Ansa wasn't just a recluse. She was ex-Black Ops, disavowed after a mission in Vekras, went sideways. They called her a traitor. But Kyla saw the truth. Ansa wasn't a traitor. She just stopped taking orders from cowards. That night, 2 ghosts made a pact. One burned from the past. One bled for the future. Together they would turn pain into planning, wounds into weapons. Kyla trained harder than most soldiers do in boot camp. Every night ended with her coughing blood into a towel. Every morning, she started again. Because pain meant she was still alive. And still alive meant she had time. Time to become something they'd never expect. Not a girl. Not a victim. A reckoning. By the end of the 2nd month, Kyla could shoot straight even while her ribs screamed. She could run 3 miles without collapsing. She could rewire a motion sensor with trembling fingers. Ansa handed her a new name. Sarah Knox, a ghost name, clean, untraceable. "Kyla Voss died in that pit," Ansa said. "Sarah Knox is who climbed out." Kyla accepted it, but she hadn't forgotten the real name. Because they were going to hear it again. Right before the end. Sarah Knox was born in silence. No ID, no record, no past. But the fire in her chest was real, stoked by every breath that tasted like metal and vengeance. The scars on her side hadn't healed. The lung hadn't fully reinflated. She didn't care. She wasn't planning to live comfortably. She was planning to make sure they didn't live at all. Ansa gave her one rule. Watch the wolves first. Then kill them. That meant recon, not rage. Not yet. Sarah traveled back toward the southern edge of Drelholm in an old pickup with plates borrowed from a junkyard. Every bump in the road screamed in her ribs, but she clenched her teeth and stared forward. The furnace was hidden in plain sight now. Its entrance was disguised behind a lumber facility called Croft Hollow Logging Company. Paperwork legit. Staff rotated weekly, no cell reception for safety reasons. But Sarah knew what was really buried beneath the concrete and fake permits. Hell. And she'd crawled out of it. She scouted for days, watched the workers, the trucks, the deliveries. Ansa had set up surveillance gear, drones the size of dragonflies, scanners masked as rocks. They found 2 things. 1. The guards had grown lazy. 2. New girls were still being brought in. Sarah watched one van pull up in the rain. Two girls stepped out, one limping, the other staring at the ground like she couldn't remember what sky looked like. Sarah nearly ran, nearly stormed the gate with nothing but her fists and fury. But Ansa's voice echoed in her head. Wolves don't sleep. Don't charge the den. Poison it from the inside. So she waited and planned. Every shipment that came through the front had one thing in common: digital manifests on a network-accessible tablet. Get inside, steal one, track their routes, find their buyers, expose the chain. It would be the first domino. But getting in meant more than walking up with a gun. She needed a disguise, and a reason. That night, Sarah slipped into a bar where low-level smugglers hung out, flashing stolen uniforms and dirty money. She listened, waited, then she found him. Nico Drex, former furnace runner, currently bragging too loudly about knowing the codes. She followed him outside, put a blade against his throat. "Miss me?" she whispered. He screamed. She dragged him behind a dumpster and broke his nose with the hilt of her knife. "I was dead, right?" she hissed. "Guess you were wrong. I want your badge, your tablet, and your silence." Nico was shaking so hard he dropped his keys. "I'll do anything. Please. They'll kill me." Sarah leaned close. "They won't get the chance." 5 minutes later, Nico was tied in the trunk of his own car with duct tape on his mouth. His badge was around Sarah's neck. His uniform fit tight, but she forced it over her bruises. At 4:12 a.m., she pulled into Croft Hollow posing as a transport supervisor, with a shipment of fake filters. The gate opened. Just like that, she was in. The air inside the compound felt colder, cleaner. Too clean, like they scrubbed the walls with bleach and secrets. She passed through the hallways unnoticed. The guards laughed, played cards. She saw one of them, Merrick, the man who'd cracked her ribs. He didn't even recognize her. But she recognized the way his fingers drummed on the counter. Same rhythm as that night. Sarah's fist clenched, but she moved past. Not yet. She found the tablet, slid it into her coat, snuck into the laundry room and used the same crawlspace she'd once used to escape. Only now, it was her passage out with intel. She emerged into the woods before dawn, heart pounding, ribs flaring, but she had what she needed. Ansa was waiting in the cabin. When she opened the tablet, her face turned to stone. "These aren't just transport logs," she muttered. "These are contracts. Names, locations, amounts, and symbols. Lots of them. Too many." Sarah leaned over, recognized one of the seals. A gold vulture with a flame in its beak. "I saw that," she said. "Tattooed on the boss's hand." Ansa nodded grimly. "Then it's worse than we thought. This isn't just a trafficking ring. It's part of a syndicate." Sarah looked out the window. The moon was bleeding over the treetops. She touched her side. The lungs still whistled when she breathed, but her hands were steady. "We burned them all," she said. "Every last one." Sarah laid the tablet on the wooden table like it was a body. Ansa hovered over it, eyes tracing the names, the codes, the payouts. Her finger stopped on a line of encrypted symbols. She tapped the screen. "This right here," she said. "This is where the blood money moves." Sarah leaned in. "You can read that?" Ansa nodded. "Only pieces. These codes are military grade. The kind we used when we wanted ghosts to move undetected. So they're not just criminals," Sarah muttered. "They're trained. Worse," Ansa said. "They're protected." Sarah felt it then, that slow churn in her gut. It wasn't just a fight anymore, it was a war. And the battlefield was layered in lies. They tracked 3 names repeated in the contracts. Tarn, Velez and Holland, high-level aliases, probably top operators in the furnace network. Each name tied to a city. Each city tied to a new facility. Each facility tied to more girls. Ansa's lips thinned. 3 heads of the snake. Cut them clean, and the body bleeds out. But Sarah had seen enough to know this wasn't a snake. It was a hydra. Still the plan was forming. Strike the heads, disrupt the flow, and draw them out. They started with Holland, the weakest link. A logistics manager working from an airstrip in Clover, who thought spreadsheets made him untouchable. Ansa contacted an old recon tech to spoof IDs. Sarah practiced walking without a limp. Her ribs still ached, but her rage was sharper. They found Holland within a week. Always dressed in beige. Always surrounded by men with guns. But he made one mistake. He liked routine. Every Friday at 5 p.m., he left the airstrip alone to visit a private lounge called the Ember Room. That's where Sarah waited. Hair, tides, hidden, dressed sharp enough to draw attention, but quiet enough to disappear. He didn't recognize her. He smiled. Offered her a drink. She took it. Then slipped the vial into his glass when he looked away. 10 minutes later, he was unconscious in the booth. 2 hours later, he was strapped to a chair in Ansa's basement. He woke up to pain, to silence, to Sarah's face, the face he once ignored in a cage beneath his empire. "You don't remember me," she said. "That's okay. You'll remember what I do next." She didn't torture him. She let Ansa handle that. Sarah just asked the questions. Who's above you? How do they stay hidden? Where do they move the girls next? Holland cracked fast. Cowards always do. He gave up names, locations, security clearances, and one phrase that made Ansa freeze. The board. Sarah narrowed her eyes. What board? Holland laughed, lips bloody. You think the furnace is the top. It's just a leg. The board funds everything. Everything. Sarah leaned in close. Then I'll burn them too. After Holland gave everything they needed, Sarah turned away. Ansa silenced him with one shot. No glory. No hesitation. Just a cleanup. They dumped the body in a quarry, filled with old ghosts. Burned his ID. Wiped the scene. The next target was Velez, the handler in charge of the furnace itself. Back to the source. Back to the dark. Sarah was ready. Ansa wasn't. She paced the cabin, arms folded. You're not healed. Sarah didn't argue. She was still coughing blood every morning. Her side was still wrapped in tight gauze. But she didn't care. There are girls down there right now. If we wait they'll vanish. Ansa slammed her hand on the table. You go in like this. You may not come out. Sarah stared at her, not defiant, not angry, just clear. I didn't crawl out of that hole to live. I crawled out to finish it. Silence. Then Ansa exhaled. There's a tunnel under the woods. A supply shaft we used in Black Ops. Old rotten, but still open. You'll come in that way. No gunfire. No hero moves. You get in, get Velez and get out. Sarah nodded, but she already knew. She wasn't getting out. She was going in to end it. The tunnel was a mouth with no tongue, just rot and silence. Sarah crouched at the edge of it, flashlight tight in one hand, a combat knife in the other. Ansa stood behind her, holding the rope that would lower her down. You sure? She asked one last time. Sarah didn't answer. She just descended. The walls closed around her like old grief. Damp earth. Cracked concrete. Rust from pipes that hadn't carried water in years. But Sarah moved forward. Every step a promise. Every breath a sacrifice. Her ribs protested with each movement. The gauze around her lungs was soaked by now. Sweat and maybe blood. She didn't check. Didn't stop. She crawled through sludge and past broken tiles. Ansa's map had been precise. The shaft led to a forgotten maintenance wing, sealed off decades ago. But the security codes still worked. Ansa had rigged a bypass device, a little black square with blinking lights. Sarah placed it on the keypad, prayed. The lock clicked open. She slipped inside.
The furnace hadn't changed. Still smelled like bleach and fear. But this time she wasn't a number. She was a blade. She moved through the corridors, like shadow. Uniform stolen from the locker room, hair tucked beneath a cap, mask over her face. Guards passed. Didn't look twice. She remembered the routes, the camera angles, the weak hinges, and she used them all. Her first stop was the detention wing. She couldn't leave them behind, the new girls. In cell 4B, she found 3. One looked about 12, the other 2 were barely older. They stared at her like she was a ghost. Sarah pressed her finger to her lips. Quiet. We're leaving. She picked the lock with a rusted pin, and ushered them out. Down the hall, left then right. Into the old utility closet where she'd hidden her exit gear. Ansa had prepped a climbing harness and a pulley. Attach them one by one, Ansa had said. I'll pull them up. Sarah secured the first girl, tugged the rope twice, waited. The pulley groaned. Ansa was still there, still holding the line. 1 girl, then 2, then 3. Sarah watched each one vanish upward. Through the shaft she'd nearly died in once. She smiled through the blood, but she wasn't done. She turned back toward the furnace hall, where Velez operated. The man who orchestrated beatings like symphonies. She remembered his boots, his voice, the way he said her name like it was a punchline. Now it was her turn. She moved through a hallway, lined with silver doors, each one a different kind of horror. Then she saw him. Velez standing at the control panel, drinking coffee like he wasn't a monster. Sarah stepped behind him, knife at his throat. He froze. Miss me, she whispered. He laughed. You made it out, he said, grinning. Didn't think you had the guts. Sarah's grip didn't tremble. I left mine on the floor, along with 3 ribs. Want them back? He turned slowly. Didn't flinch. You think killing me stops this? You're a scratch on a monster's skin. Sarah leaned in. I'm a bullet in its spine. She forced him toward the room labeled Core Open. Inside were the master terminals, security feed, data drives. She handcuffed him to the radiator, plugged in the drive Ansa had given her. It began downloading everything: footage, logs, names, evidence. Velez smiled through the sweat. You think anyone will listen? Corruption runs deeper than fire. Sarah nodded. Then I'll drown it in blood. The download hit 100%. She ejected the drive, turned toward Velez. He was breathing heavy now. Something in his eyes shifted. Not fear, curiosity. You got out, he said softly. Why come back? Sarah pulled off her mask, so he'd see her face. See the girl he tried to break. Because there are still girls in cages, she said. And because you didn't kill me when you had the chance. She didn't wait for a response, just pressed the trigger. The silence shot echoed like thunder in her soul. Velez slumped. Done. Sarah grabbed the last smoke grenade from her belt and pulled the pin. Flames were too loud, but smoke would confuse. Set off the alarms. Mask her escape. She sprinted down the hallway as chaos bloomed behind her. Through the corridors, back through the maintenance wing, to the shaft. She clipped herself into the harness and tugged twice. The rope jolted, then began to lift. Her ribs felt like shattering glass. Her breath wheezed like torn paper, but she climbed. Hand over hand, lungs screaming, vision fading. She emerged into the cold night as sirens howled behind her. Ansa grabbed her, dragged her clear, then held her as she collapsed. Not dead, not yet, just broken, but victorious. They had the drive, they had the names, and 2 heads of the Hydra were gone. The storm didn't come from the sky. It came in the form of men in suits with dead eyes. The kind that didn't flinch at blood. The kind that didn't speak unless it was fatal. They showed up 3 days after Velez died. Not at the cabin, but at a safe house 2 towns over. One Ansa had set up as a decoy. They burned it to the ground. No questions asked, just fire. And silence. Ansa watched the footage on a secured drone feed. They're not just cleaning up, she said. They're hunting. Sarah sat by the window, hand pressed to her wrapped ribs. Every breath was a negotiation, but her mind was sharp. Too sharp. They know about the drive. They know I got out with names. Ansa nodded grimly. They're panicking. Sarah smiled, lips cracked. Good. That meant they were scared. That meant the next strike would count even more. But Ansa's face didn't soften. They'll send ghosts next, she warned. Not suits. Not runners. Operators. The kind trained to disappear you, body and history. Sarah didn't blink. Let them try. They spent the next 48 hours fortifying the cabin. Traps, sensors, multiple escape tunnels. Ansa taught Sarah how to hold a weapon steady even while coughing blood. How to set a charge with shaking fingers. They both knew what was coming, but they didn't expect it to come so fast. At 2:13 a.m., the perimeter alarm chirped once, then went dead. No sirens, no lights, just silence. Ansa grabbed her rifle. Sarah reached for her blade. No time to suit up. They moved like animals, low, fast, eyes wide. Then the power cut. Darkness swallowed the room whole. A whisper came through the walls. Boots. 5 sets. No talking, just precision. They're inside. Ansa breathed. They split. Sarah slipped into the shadows behind the fireplace. Ansa took the back corridor. The first man came in with night vision goggles. Didn't even see the tripwire. The explosion wasn't loud, but it was enough. 2 more followed, flanking. Sarah moved before they did. Blade under one's chin. Gun taken from his holster before he hit the floor. The second turned. Too late. Ansa dropped him with 1 shot to the chest. Then the 5th man spoke. From the hallway. Kayla Vols, he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was calm. Professional. You've made quite a mess. Sarah stepped out, blood on her shirt. I'm not finished yet. The man lowered his weapon slightly. Don't flatter yourself. You're a cleanup job. Nothing more. Ansa leveled her rifle at him. Last warning. The man raised his hands. I'm not here to kill you. Sarah narrowed her eyes. Then why are you here? He smiled faintly. To offer a trade. He pulled out a thin folder. Dropped it on the floor. Sarah approached cautiously. Inside photographs. Girls. Dozens of them. Locations. Maps. Smuggling routes. And one more thing. A thumb drive. With the symbol of the gold vulture burned into the side. The board is pulling out, he said. Too much exposure. You win. Sarah didn't believe it. She picked up the folder anyway. Why give me this? The man looked her dead in the eye. Because there's something worse coming. You killed Velez. You stirred the water. Now the things that were hiding, they're awake. He stepped back into the shadows. Disappeared without a sound. Sarah stood there, folder in hand, breathing ragged. Ansa slowly lowered her rifle. What do you think? She asked. Sarah stared down at the thumb drive.
The storm didn't come from the sky. It came in the form of men in suits with dead eyes. The kind that didn't flinch at blood. The kind that didn't speak unless it was fatal. They showed up 3 days after Velez died. Not at the cabin, but at a safe house 2 towns over. One Ansa had set up as a decoy. They burned it to the ground. No questions asked, just fire. And silence. Ansa watched the footage on a secured drone feed. They're not just cleaning up, she said. They're hunting. Sarah sat by the window, hand pressed to her wrapped ribs. Every breath was a negotiation. But her mind was sharp. Too sharp. They know about the drive. They know I got out with names. Ansa nodded grimly. They're panicking. Sarah smiled, lips cracked. Good. That meant they were scared. That meant the next strike would count even more. But Ansa's face didn't soften. They'll send ghosts next, she warned. Not suits. Not runners. Operators. The kind trained to disappear you. Body and history. Sarah didn't blink. Let them try. They spent the next 48 hours fortifying the cabin. Traps. Sensors. Multiple escape tunnels. Ansa taught Sarah how to hold a weapon steady even while coughing blood. How to set a charge with shaking fingers. They both knew what was coming. But they didn't expect it to come so fast. At 2:13 a.m., the perimeter alarm chirped once. Then went dead. No sirens. No lights. Just silence. Ansa grabbed her rifle. Sarah reached for her blade. No time to suit up. They moved like animals. Low, fast. Eyes wide. Then the power cut. Darkness swallowed the room whole. A whisper came through the walls. Boots. 5 sets. No talking. Just precision. They're inside. Ansa breathed. They split. Sarah slipped into the shadows behind the fireplace. Ansa took the back corridor. The first man came in with night vision goggles. Didn't even see the tripwire. The explosion wasn't loud. But it was enough. 2 more followed. Flanking. Sarah moved before they did. Blade under one's chin. Gun taken from his holster before he hit the floor. The second turned. Too late. Ansa dropped him with 1 shot to the chest. Then the 5th man spoke. From the hallway. Kyla Voss, he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was calm. Professional. You've made quite a mess. Sarah stepped out. Blood on her shirt. I'm not finished yet. The man lowered his weapon slightly. Don't flatter yourself. You're a cleanup job. Nothing more. Ansa leveled her rifle at him. Last warning. The man raised his hands. I'm not here to kill you. Sarah narrowed her eyes. Then why are you here? He smiled faintly. To offer a trade. He pulled out a thin folder. Dropped it on the floor. Sarah approached cautiously. Inside photographs. Girls. Dozens of them. Locations. Maps. Smuggling routes. And one more thing. A thumb drive with the symbol of the gold vulture burned into the side. The board is pulling out, he said. Too much exposure. You win. Sarah didn't believe it. She picked up the folder anyway. Why give me this? The man looked her dead in the eye. Because there's something worse coming. You killed Velez. You stirred the water. Now the things that were hiding. They're awake. He stepped back into the shadows. Disappeared without a sound. Sarah stood there, folder in hand. Breathing ragged. Ansa slowly lowered her rifle. What do you think? She asked. Sarah stared down at the thumb drive. It's a map. To either the end. Or the beginning of something darker. The cabin no longer felt like shelter. It felt like a war room. The folder sat on the table. Untouched since the ghost handed it over. But it burned in Sarah's mind like a second wound. Ansa paced, chewing the inside of her cheek like it might reveal answers. You really think the board's pulling out? She asked. Sarah shook her head slowly. No, they're just erasing their tracks. Ansa tapped the folder. Then why give us this? Because something worse is coming, Sarah said, echoing the man's words. But what's worse than them? She opened the folder again. This time with gloves. Just in case. Inside were 4 pages of intel, each labeled with a code name. Riken, Dr. Alen, Went, and a blank page with only a sigil, a coiled serpent inside a black triangle. Ansa exhaled sharply. I've seen that before. She pulled a battered notebook from her rucksack, flipped to a page labeled Black Vault Projects. There it was. The same symbol. You don't get access to this unless you've already sold your soul, she said. Sarah's fingers tensed. So the board was just a face. The real power's buried deeper. They plugged the thumb drive into a secure offline laptop. Encrypted. Of course. But Ansa had tools. She'd cracked things designed to withstand war tribunals. Within hours the drive coughed up video files, audio clips, and a list. A list of names. Real ones. Not code names. Senators. CEOs. Military commanders. Academics. People on the news. People with medals on their jackets. Sarah stared at the list like it was a knife made of facts. Each name tied to a location. A timeline. A purchase. They weren't just trafficking girls, she whispered. They were building something. Ansa leaned in. What do you mean? Sarah pulled up one of the voice memos. Static. Then a clipped voice. Subject KV. Rib fractures healing abnormally fast. Lung puncture sealed in under 72 hours. No infection. Resilience protocol working. Recommend extraction for phase 2. Silence. Then a different voice. Proceed. Eliminate witnesses. Ansa sat back, eyes wide. They were testing on you. Sarah didn't blink. They didn't just want to break us. They wanted to use us. You think I made it out because I was lucky? Ansa looked pale. No. You made it out because they wanted to see what you'd do. Sarah's stomach turned. Memories came back with a sickening chill. The injections. The migraines. The heat in her blood. She remembered how her wounds had healed faster than they should have. How her fever had vanished in hours. They hadn't just been torturing her. They'd been modifying her. Trying to create something. She looked down at her hands. They didn't shake. Even now. After all the blood. All the bodies. Ansa stepped in front of her. Held her shoulders. You're not a product. You're not an experiment. Sarah looked up. No. I'm proof that their experiment failed. Because I remember. And I fight back. But one name on the list caught her eye. Dr. Kaylin Illen, founder of a medical research firm. Fronted as a cancer study program. But behind the curtains. Phase 2 facility. Still active. Still funded. Located in a remote Arctic base named Argyros. Sarah stared at the word. Then at Ansa. We go there. Ansa raised an eyebrow. That's suicide. Sarah smiled faintly. Not if we're already dead. They began prepping immediately. Arctic gear. Silent weapons. Forged IDs. And backups of the entire drive. Set to auto-send to multiple news agencies. If Sarah didn't log in every 24 hours. Insurance. Because she knew what waited for them at Argyros wasn't just soldiers. It was creators. And the only thing more dangerous than a creation out of control is the creator who still believes in their godhood. The pilot didn't ask questions. He was paid not to. 2 women in heavy coats. No luggage. No names. Just coordinates. They flew in silence. The twin-prop plane slicing through the icy wind like a scalpel through tissue. Sarah stared out the window, watching the mountains fall away into nothing but endless white. The snow below was undisturbed, untouched by civilization. Ansa leaned closer and murmured, We're not landing on a runway. Sarah nodded. Because this place isn't supposed to exist. Argyros. A word never spoken in public. A facility never mapped. Rumors said it was built during the Cold War, then abandoned. But the files proved otherwise. Dr. Illen had relocated there 5 years ago. And the last shipment, labeled Gen 3 subjects, was time-stamped 3 months ago. The plane jolted. They were descending. The landscape tilted sharply. Below them was a cliffside carved into tiers. And at its base, a dark geometry. Not a building, but a bunker. Hexagonal, buried halfway into the ice. As the wheels touched down on a rough ice pad, the pilot muttered, 10 minutes. Sarah and Ansa jumped out into a howling blizzard. Visibility was almost zero. They moved fast, following a beacon Ansa had hacked from old satellite ghost data. There, a concealed entrance. Steel door. Fingerprint scanner. No guards. That was the first red flag. The second came when the door opened automatically as they approached. It hissed open like it had been waiting. They slipped inside. Warm. Too warm. Sterile halls lit with blue overheads. Everything was silent. No footsteps. No movement. until a voice echoed from the walls. "Welcome back, Subject KV." Sarah froze. The voice was familiar. Calm. Precise. Dr. Kalen Illen. He wasn't hiding. He was inviting her. Ansa swore under her breath and pulled her weapon. They moved cautiously, sweeping each corner. Sarah's chest ached with every breath, her ribs still healing, her lungs still tender, but adrenaline numbed it. They passed through a glass chamber with surgical beds, all empty, then into a lab with walls of fluid tanks. Floating inside, test subjects, some human, some not quite. Bodies spliced with synthetic muscle, tubes pumping pale blue liquid. Ansa whispered, "What is this place?" "Evolution," said the voice. They turned. He stood behind a glass wall, untouched by time. Dr. Illen, white coat, thin-framed glasses, smiling like a man admiring art. "You shouldn't have survived, KV," he said softly. "Yet here you are, uncatalogued, uncontrolled." Sarah stepped forward, fury tightening every muscle. "You turned children into weapons. You murdered them when they didn't obey." Ellen shrugged. "No. I liberated them from biology. Your pain was transformation. You should thank me." Sarah raised her gun, fired. The glass spider webbed, but didn't break. He didn't flinch. "Just step back. You'll find the truth is bigger than me." The program was global. I was merely a conduit. "You think if you kill me this ends?" Sarah fired again. The glass cracked deeper. Sirens started blaring. Gas hissed from the vents. Ansa screamed, "Run!" They sprinted back into the corridor. Red lights flooded the hall. Doors slammed shut behind them. Sarah gritted her teeth against the rising burn in her lungs. Not now. Not here. They found a service ladder. Climbed. Came out in a maintenance shaft above the storage wing. Below them, a chamber filled with cryopods. Hundreds. Children. Teenagers. Some still alive. Vitals blinking faintly on screens. "This is where they kept the next generation," Ansa whispered. "Still waiting for testing." Sarah claimed every one of them could have been her. Every one of them was a stolen life. "We're not leaving them," she said. Ansa nodded grimly. "We trigger overload. Cook this place from the..." They found the central core, a thermal regulator system with emergency override. Sarah planted charges on each stabilizer. Ansa coded a 5-minute countdown. And then, Sarah turned. "I want to see him one more time." They returned to the observation room. Ellen was gone. But his voice echoed one last time. "You'll never outrun what you are, Sarah. You were built for war." Sarah stared into the empty glass. "I was built to survive." She pressed the trigger. And the core began to hum. They ran. The lights began to pulse. One by one, the cryopods began to fail. Not killing the children, but unlocking them, awakening them. Dozens of eyes opened. Some afraid. Some glowing. Sarah helped the first girl out. Held her like a sister she never had. "We're getting out," she promised. And for the first time in years her voice didn't tremble. The girl in Sarah's arms blinked slowly. Her skin was pale. Her arms were thin. But her eyes burned. With a quiet unspoken fury. Sarah recognized it. The look of someone who'd endured. Who'd survived something they were never meant to remember. Around them, cryopods hissed open one by one, each releasing another child. Weak. Disoriented. Frightened. Ansa whispered, "There's too many. We can't carry them all. We don't have to." Sarah stood tall. She turned to the growing crowd of awakened children and said, "If you can walk, walk. If you can't, hold on to someone. This place dies in minutes. But you don't." The children looked at each other, then at her. And they moved. Like soldiers. No instructions needed. Some limped. Others leaned on each other. But none panicked. None cried. Ansa stared in disbelief. What were they turning them into? Sarah didn't answer. Because she already knew. They were turning them into her. They reached the main corridor. Just as the floor began to shake. One of the stabilizers had gone critical.
Alarm screamed overhead. Steam burst from the walls. Doors started to fail. Sarah led them through back routes, storage tunnels and maintenance stairs. Ansa scouted ahead, clearing paths. By the time they reached the surface, the last 10 seconds were ticking down. 9, 8, 7. They emerged into a blizzard, children pouring out behind them, shielding their eyes. Sarah turned back once. Argebryce stood like a broken tooth in the side of the cliff. 6, 5, 4. A pulse of blue light burst through the seams of the bunker. 3, 2. And then, the mountain screamed. A roar of fire and steel. Argebryce collapsed inward, the ice swallowing its remains. Children threw themselves to the ground. The shock wave thundered across the frozen valley. Sarah shielded a boy with her body. When the silence came, it was complete. Just wind, and breathing, and freedom. For the first time in years, Sarah looked around and didn't feel alone. They weren't numbers. They weren't subjects. They were survivors. But freedom was only step one. Where do we go now? A girl asked. Sarah stared out into the horizon, then down at the tracker on her wrist. South. There's a drop zone 40 clicks from here. Old evac route. If we make it there, we make it out. Ansa frowned. With this many kids. Sarah turned to her. We'll make it. We have to. They moved. A caravan of the forgotten. Tattered medical robes. Frostbitten bare feet. And eyes too old for their age. Along the way, Sarah and Ansa scavenged broken outposts. Old ranger stations. Snagged thermal blankets. Ration bars. Flares. The children adapted fast. No complaints. They rotated who carried the weaker ones. Some even took turns scouting ahead. Sarah realized something chilling. These kids had never been taught how to be kids. They were disciplined, silent, efficient, as if someone had programmed them for war. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was proof. Proof that the program had worked and needed to be destroyed completely. By the third day the blizzard cleared. The ice plains stretched in every direction. On the fourth day one of the older boys spotted a black shape on the horizon. A signal tower. Abandoned, but still standing. They made camp nearby. Lit a fire for the first time. And for the first time, the children laughed. Small, quiet, but real. One of them, a boy named Nico, sat beside Sarah. You came back for us, he said. Why? Sarah hesitated, then answered truthfully. Because someone left me behind once, and I swore I'd never do the same. Nico nodded slowly, then reached into his coat, pulled out a piece of folded foil, inside a broken burned ID chip. He handed it to her. It was him, he said. Dr. Ullen. He used to come down to the pod sometimes. Talk to us while we slept. What did he say? Sarah asked. Nico's voice was flat. That the world didn't deserve us. That we were better. Sarah closed her hand over the chip. The fire crackled. Ansa returned from the tower with a half-charged radio. It works. Sort of. Enough to get a signal out. Sarah took it. Held down the button. This is KV Rogue Operative from the Arga program. I have survivors. 43 of them. Location grid south 44.6. By east 28.9. If anyone's listening, we're coming home. She released the button. Static. Then, a woman's voice. Faint, but clear. You're not alone. Repeat. You're not alone. Extraction and wrote. Sarah lowered the radio. For the first time, her shoulders relaxed. But in the distance, past the flame, past the mountains, something shifted in the wind. Not thunder. Rotors. Multiple. Ansa's face paled. They're coming too fast. Sarah turned. What do you mean? Ansa held up a satellite readout from the tower's data core. A black mark was moving across the screen. Not friendly. They knew we'd survive. They planned for this. And as the first silhouette of a black chopper split the sky, Sarah whispered to herself, then let them come. The first bullet didn't come from the sky. It came from the trees. Just past the clearing where the children rested, a tree split open with a crack. A warning shot. Sarah didn't flinch. She stood slowly, eyes locked on the black helicopter descending from the clouds. Its side hatch opened. 6 soldiers in matte gray armor dropped to the ground in perfect formation. No insignia, no flag, but Sarah recognized the make. Ghost Division. She hadn't seen them since Arga brokers burned the first time. They were the kind of men you didn't talk to. You survived them, or you didn't. Ansa knelt by the children, motioning for silence. The kids didn't panic, didn't scream. They crouched low, alert. Silent warriors, just as they'd been trained to be. Velez, a voice boomed through a modulated con. Stand down. You have something that doesn't belong to you. Sarah stepped forward. This whole mountain used to not belong to you. Now look at it. The ghost unit shifted. Weapons raised. The lead soldier, visor reflecting the firelight, took a step forward. The children come with us, or we take them. Sarah didn't blink. You didn't send a cleanup crew. You sent an extraction unit, which means someone up the chain didn't approve of the detonation. She pointed to the ruined bunker behind them. They're evidence now, and so am I. The lead soldier hesitated, long enough for Sarah to know he knew she was right. Then he signaled with 2 fingers. A second squad dropped from the opposite chopper, flanking them. Ansa muttered, 10 o'clock Low Ridge. They're trying to surround. I know, Sarah said. I'm counting their mistakes. How many do you see? 5. Ansa whispered. They think the kids are still scared. They don't realize they're soldiers too. Sarah nodded, then raised her voice. I've got a question. What happens to a ghost when the ones it haunted come back? The kids rose. 43 of them, each holding makeshift slings, sharpened rods, rocks, and salvaged gear. Not a real army, but enough. And Ghost Division wasn't used to resistance, especially not from children. The soldiers froze. One looked up, confused, as his gun was yanked from his hands by a tripwire hidden under snow. Another fell backward, as Nico dropped from a pine branch and jammed a flare into his helmet. The battlefield exploded into chaos. But it wasn't a massacre. It was a message. The kids didn't kill. They disabled. They outmaneuvered. They outthought. Sarah charged the commander directly. He met her with a baton. She ducked, rolled, came up behind him and ripped off his comms pack. You were told this would be easy, she hissed. You were lied to. He swung wildly. Sarah grabbed his wrist midair, snapped it. He went down. A flare lit the tree line. Ansa raised the radio. We're compromised. Repeat, compromised. But holding. A burst of static. Then a calm clipped reply. ETA 7 minutes. Hold your ground. Don't let the ghosts write the ending. Sarah smiled. For once someone believed them. The ghost soldiers regrouped. But they didn't press forward. They hadn't expected resistance. And now they hesitated. In war, hesitation is death. The kids advanced like a wave. One girl screamed, not in fear but in rage, as she hurled a shard of metal into a drone overhead. It spiraled down in smoke. A boy ripped open a soldier's backpack, jammed his own GPS jammer inside, and sent it back on a mulebot in the opposite direction. He yelled. Sarah barked, make noise, be unpredictable, and they did. By the time the evac ship appeared on the horizon, the enemy wasn't pushing anymore. They were retreating. The last helicopter fired smoke and lifted off, abandoning the soldiers who couldn't make it to the winch in time. Sarah approached the final man, wounded, coughing, broken visor. She knelt beside him. Tell whoever sent you. She leaned closer. The ghosts are awake now, and they remember everything. He stared up at her, not with fear, but with respect, then closed his eyes. The evac vessel landed with a thunderous hiss. Medical personnel rushed out. Blankets, Thermal scans. Triage. One officer approached Sarah. You did the impossible. Sarah shook her head. No, they did. She pointed to the children. Dirty, bruised, defiant. These aren't subjects. They're the future. The officer looked around, then gestured. Come. There's someone who wants to speak with you. Sarah followed. Up the ramp. Into the command deck, where a woman stood waiting. Silver hair, sharp eyes, and a badge Sarah hadn't seen in a decade. Director Kiva. Sarah's voice was a mix of disbelief and memory. Kiva nodded. You were my best recruit, and now my biggest problem. Sarah raised a brow. Funny way to say thank you. Kiva walked forward, handed her a tablet. On the screen, a dossier marked PR Ashect Echo Vertical Bar Contingency Status. Unknown. Sarah scrolled. Images. Children. Not just from RG Rose, but other places. Other bunkers. Kiva whispered. This wasn't the only one. You exposed the first. But there are others. Sarah didn't blink. Then let's go wake the rest. The file wasn't supposed to exist. It had been buried under 7 layers of encryption, in a server that no longer had a name. But it still breathed. And when Director Kiva handed it to her, Sarah saw her past. Not in memories, but in classified bullet points. Name Sarah Velez. Status, terminated. Designation, Subject Sarah 1. Function baseline weaponization candidate. Failure mode, uncontrollable empathy response. She nearly dropped the tablet. They called my heart a failure mode, she muttered. Kiva said nothing, just lit a cigarette with trembling fingers, and stared at the hologram of the data spiraling above the command deck. These files weren't just hidden. They were meant to never resurface. Sarah flipped through the rest of the pages. Black and white photos. A younger version of herself strapped to a surgical chair. Redacted dialogue from handlers trying to condition her. A record of her escape, labeled Containment Breach Omega. But the worst page came last. A list of others. Other children. Not dead. Just reassigned. To programs with names like Silent Doctrine, Memory Divide, Harvest of the Mind. How many of these kids are still out there? Sarah asked. Kiva looked tired. Older than before. Too many. And they're scattered across zones we don't even acknowledge exist. Sarah clenched her jaw. What about their handlers? What happened to the ones who ran this? Kiva exhaled smoke. Some were absorbed into civilian roles. Some were neutralized. And some. She tapped another button. A photo came up. A man in a pristine suit, surrounded by military officers. Named Dr. Arkady Thorne. Current title, Global Advisor, Neural Ethics Coalition. Sarah's eyes narrowed. He's alive. Thriving. Kiva spat. Your story scared them, Sarah. But they didn't stop the machine. They just gave it a new paint job. Rebranded the horror. Sarah stood still for a long time. Then she whispered, I want everything you have on him. Kiva didn't blink. Done. But if you go after him, you won't just be fighting ghosts. You'll be fighting gods. You'll be fighting gods. Sarah smirked. Good. I'm tired of chasing shadows. I want to see the hand behind the curtain. Later that night, while the children slept in temporary cots aboard the evacuation cruiser, Sarah stood in the dim light of the medbay and scrolled through Thorne's public speeches. He spoke of peace, of technological ethics, of guarding the innocence of future generations. And yet, behind his eyes, Sarah saw it. The same cold logic, the same ruthlessness that had wired electrodes into her spine. Ansa stepped in beside her. You're going to go after him, aren't you? Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to. Ansa nodded anyway. I'll prep a route. I know a fixer in the Viltroy sector. Quiet airspace. No satellites. You'll need gear. Clean IDs. Weapons. Sarah didn't look away from the screen. Not weapons. Just truth. Ansa laughed. It wasn't amused. It was resigned. You think Thorne's afraid of truth? Sarah turned to her. No, but the world that funds him is. At sunrise the cruiser docked in a neutral medical port off the southern cliffs of Aratus. Reporters swarmed the perimeter, but Kiva had already scrambled their feeds. No images of the children were leaked. No footage of the battle. Just whispers. Just rumors. And while the media debated whether the event was real, the world governments issued simultaneous denials. No evidence of unethical child programs. No proof of extrajudicial facilities in Argyros. No record of a woman named Sarah Velez. But behind closed doors, files were opened. Old orders were pulled from burn bins. Names were circled. Assets were reactivated. And somewhere in a facility that looked like a corporate think tank, Arcady Thorne read the news with a small smile. She made it further than expected, he said. But no matter. Let her come. He opened a drawer, pulled out a file marked Valkyrie 1. Inside a photo of Sarah, older now, burn scars, gray in her hair. And below it, her behavioral profile, still listed as dangerous. If untethered. Thorne picked up a pen, crossed it out, wrote uncontainable, then turned to his assistant. Burn all operational orders related to her capture. If she finds us, we need no traces. Erase everything, except the lessons. Back on the ship, Sarah sat beside a young boy named Milo, the same one who had screamed at the sky when the bombs fell. He was quiet now, staring out the window. You think it's over? He asked. Sarah shook her head. No, but it's ours now. No one gets to write our story for us anymore. He nodded, then asked, what are we? Sarah smiled faintly. Proof that survival isn't weakness. That healing is a weapon. Milo looked up. You're going to fight him, aren't you? Yes, she said softly. And if I don't come back? He shook his head. You will. She kissed his forehead gently, then stood. It was time. Time to move again. Not because
they scrubbed the archives, erased her from birth certificates, hospital logs, biometric grids, deleted her from facial recognition databases, thermal signature patterns, and DNA index vaults. To the world's machines, she didn't exist. But the world's people remembered her. Because revolution doesn't need an address, just a name whispered loud enough to shake steel walls, and Sarah Velez had become that name. It started with the children, Milo, Naira, Samu, survivors with fire still in their eyes. They told their stories to volunteer doctors, to visiting activists, to undercover journalists who risked black-site retribution to listen. The children didn't ask for pity, they asked to be seen, and from their trembling voices came fragments of Sarah. She pulled us out of the cages, she took bullets for us, she told us we weren't experiments, we were people. Their words traveled like sparks in a dry forest, igniting message boards, underground news threads, encrypted comms between rebel cells. Then came the name, Sarah Lives. A whisper, then a chant. Then a digital war cry. Arcady Thorne watched it unfold from the safety of his surveillance-proof compound in the Alps. He smiled at the screens. The myth always grows bigger than the soldier. He turned to his analysts. Let it burn itself out. They'll tire of ghosts. But deep inside, he knew, this wasn't a ghost story anymore. It was a reckoning. Meanwhile, Sarah crossed the border into Vulturous sector under the name Ella Morris, wearing a synthetic faceplate, and carrying a satchel with no weapons, just a transmitter, a data shard, and the original blueprints of program Valkyrie. The fixer Ansa promised was waiting for her at an old wind farm, long since converted into a data hacking station. His name was Jin Kor, a defector from Thorne's neural division. I watched them train children to kill their own reflections, he told her, handing over the schematic. They called it ethical redirection, I called it hell. Sarah nodded. Then let's break the gates of hell open. Inside the compound, Thorne's PR team doubled down, flooded the feeds with false flags, released a fake manifesto under Sarah's name. framed her as a radical extremist, tried to poison her image in the public mind. But it didn't stick, because the truth already had a face, and the children had already told it. Videos leaked, real ones, of the facility in Archairos, of children chained in classrooms, of guards dragging limp bodies, and in every frame where Sarah appeared, bloodied, bruised, breaking the locks, she looked nothing like a terrorist. She looked like a mother. A warrior, a ghost who came back not for revenge, but for rescue. In 24 hours, 9 governments issued calls for inquiry, 3 severed contracts with Thorne's Neural Coalition, and 1, the Republic of Eros, opened its borders to survivors of experimental programs. But Sarah didn't stop to celebrate. She was already in the tunnels under Thorne's secondary facility in Vulturus, planting truth bombs. Each server node she found was seeded with decrypted documents, witness testimonies, audio of screams, signed orders with Thorne's initials. Let them see everything, she whispered, uploading the final payload. Let the world gag on the truth they pretended not to know. Then she lit the match. The explosion wasn't fire, it was exposure. Every screen in the sector glitched for 7.4 seconds, and then, without warning, they began to play footage of surgeries, training routines, children sobbing behind glass, and one voice narrating it all, hers. Sarah's voice, recorded in the calm of an earlier night. You tried to delete me, you erased my birth, my name, my parents, but I remembered. And now, so will you. In his compound, Thorne smashed the glass of his command tablet. The feed wouldn't shut off. His own face was now plastered on city walls by anonymous hackers. Memes of him shaking hands with dictators. Captions that read Architect of Empathy Death, Godfather of Ghosts, the man who broke children. He ordered his staff to initiate Protocol Eclipse, the total erasure of his digital existence. But it was already too late. The people didn't need records anymore. They had memory, and memory had gone viral. Sarah walked through the alleys of the Vulturous slums as the sun rose behind her. People whispered, some pointed, none dared approach. Not yet. She sat on the edge of a stone bench and watched children play, free, unchipped, unafraid. And for the first time since she escaped the compound years ago, she allowed herself to cry, not for what she lost, but for what survived. Ansa approached silently, holding a fresh data slab. The UN Council wants to talk to you. They're calling you a symbol now. Sarah wiped her tears. I don't care about titles. I just want him to answer. Ansa nodded. He will, soon, but for now. She handed Sarah a small piece of paper. It was hand-drawn. A sketch, crayon lines of a woman with a scarred face, and children surrounding her, smiling. At the bottom, in shaky handwriting, it read, she didn't forget us, so we'll never forget her. Sarah folded it slowly, then stood. I'm not done, not until Thorne stands where he put all of us, in the dark, alone. They thought they understood power, surveillance grids, shock collars, biometric gates. They thought it was about control, pain management, fear psychology, behavioral engineering. But Sarah Velez taught them a different lesson. Power wasn't what you inflicted, it was what you survived. Her body still bore the marks of their cruelty. 3 broken ribs, 1 shoulder torn from its socket, nerve damage in her right hand. Bone shrapnel still lodged in her hip from the disciplinary detonation they once called necessary correction, but she moved like fire anyway. And fire does not ask for permission to burn. Word spread faster than Thorne's silencing teams could chase it. In the refugee zones of Calixa, they painted murals of her holding back fire with bare hands. In the storm-battered islands of Niga, the fishermen named their boats after her. Even in the heart of the enemy's empire, children played a new game in back alleys. One would shout, I'm Thorne, and the others would scream back, you're nothing. Sarah's coming. She never asked for the myth, but she used it. Each fracture in her bones became a fracture in their doctrine. Each limp in her step, a crack in their illusion of invincibility. Because people weren't afraid anymore, and that terrified the architects more than any bullet. In a classified bunker beneath Argent Peak, Thorne's remaining war council gathered. He paced before them, jaw clenched. She's dismantling perception itself. She's making slaves feel like heroes. General Vosk replied, we still have the fireline drones, and the nerve-fold deterrence. But Thorne slammed his fist into the table. You don't understand. She's not just attacking us, she's changing the rules. She made suffering sacred. She made resistance holy. In a desert cavern once used for chemical testing, Sarah trained the next wave. Not killers, not soldiers, truth bearers. They were children mostly. Teenagers once branded too broken to rehabilitate. But Sarah saw something else, clarity, purpose, and a rage that had survived without turning to poison. She taught them how to move unseen, how to dismantle drone eyes without tech, how to plant a memory grenade inside a propaganda file, how to stay alive long enough to speak. They didn't need weapons. They were weapons. Memory made flesh. Scars turned to scripts. One by one they infiltrated communication towers and rewired broadcast loops to beam underground testimonies. A boy named Kale, who once hadn't spoken for 4 years, now whispered his story into a nation's consciousness. I was 10 when they erased my name, but I remember my mother's lullaby. I remember the way Sarah held my hand and said, you still belong to you. And suddenly, the world's people stopped flinching at state voices. They stopped saluting hollow uniforms. They started asking the questions Thorne's empire had buried for decades. Sarah didn't need armies. She needed witnesses. Because truth, once seen, is impossible to unsee. Still the architects struck back. Operation Shatterglass, a coordinated raid on safe houses, broadcast nodes, and suspected rebel outposts. 300 taken, 72 confirmed killed. Children, elders, medics. But the stories didn't stop. In fact, they multiplied. Because blood, when spilled in truth's name, becomes ink. And every body lost gave birth to 100 more voices. Sarah watched the name scroll on her portable interface. She didn't cry, not yet. Instead, she carved every fallen name into a wall deep in the ruins of a bombed sanctuary. And underneath them all, she wrote, you didn't die for nothing. You lived so others could see. Then she turned to Ansa and whispered, it's time. We hit the Citadel. The Citadel was Thorne's fortress of perception, a floating archive of propaganda, housed above the coral trench, shielded, encrypted, unbreachable. Except, it wasn't. Not to someone who knew its ghosts, not to Sarah, because it was built on the same codebase as the facility that once imprisoned her. She was its skeleton key. As she and her team descended toward it, Sarah's ribs ached, her shoulder throbbed. Pain flared in waves down her spine, but she smiled, because every step she took was one the architects swore she'd never survive. Her body had been broken, but her presence was breaking something much larger, their belief that pain made people less. She was proof it made them more. They fractured her bones, but in return, she fractured their worldview. The last time Sarah screamed was inside a white-walled cell, 12 years ago. They had stripped her of sound, of speech, of name, of meaning. They called it vocal severance therapy, a euphemism for something unspeakably cruel. Tiny filament explosives implanted in the throat, triggered by pitch thresholds. One scream of pain was all it took. Then silence, permanent. But silence is not surrender. And Sarah learned to weaponize the void they left behind. While they tried to erase her from history, she was turning quiet into command. A look, a hand signal, a nod. Entire movements were born from gestures, not shouts. Entire revolutions orchestrated without a word. Because power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits, it watches, it listens. Inside the Citadel, alarms shrieked. Floodlights flickered like panicked eyes. Sarah's team moved like phantoms through corridors paved with lies. Every wall bore portraits of the regime's architects. Every hallway played looping messages of obedience. But with a few silent commands, Ansa and Kale rerouted the core audio systems. Suddenly, the Citadel fell silent. No anthem, no orders, just the hum of fear. And Thorne, he felt it. A tension he couldn't name.
a pressure against the back of his skull, like the air itself was rebelling. He rushed to the main surveillance deck. Every screen was blank, every feed cut, every voice gone. He slammed his fist on the console. Why can't I hear them? Because silence was now Sarah's domain, and in that stillness, she delivered her final blow. She stood alone in the Citadel's cathedral chamber, the place where Thorne's speeches were broadcast across continents, and without a word, she turned on the hollow beam. The world watched as a woman they believed, dead, stood in the very heart of the regime. She said nothing. She didn't need to. She looked straight into the lens, lifted her sleeve, and revealed the scar, the one shaped like a dog tag, the one from Facility R6, the one everyone had been told was a fabrication of enemy propaganda. And then, with calm hands, she pulled her shirt aside, revealed the implanted detonator node near her throat. Proof, visual, undeniable, brutal, silence as evidence, trauma as truth. Her voice had been taken, but her body had become a testimony. All across the world, people stopped, mid-stride, mid-meal, mid-war, to watch, to listen, to feel the silence. And in that quiet, something ancient stirred, something louder than any speech, any weapon, any flag, the collective sound of realization. They had been lied to. They had been conditioned to fear a woman who never raised her voice, because they knew what she was capable of, if she ever truly spoke. But now, she didn't have to. The silence screamed for her, and Thorne, he collapsed into his chair, surrounded by generals who suddenly felt small. Shut it off, he whispered. Cut the feed. But no one moved, because even they, the architects, had heard it. The echo of guilt, the silence of exposure, the noise of everything falling apart. That night, statues fell, soldiers walked off the field, and dropped their rifles. Children pressed their palms to screens and traced the scar on Sarah's chest with trembling fingers. In hidden rooms and burning cities, the silence replayed over and over, until it became rhythm, a chant, a prayer. No words, just meaning. No war cries, just truth. In a small village in the wasteland province, an old woman lit a lantern and whispered. She never needed to speak. She just needed to stand. Sarah didn't smile in the broadcast. She simply let the camera see her, every bruise, every injury, every unspoken loss. And then she placed her hand on her heart. The beam cut. The screen went dark, and the world exploded into something new. She walked out of the Citadel's broadcast room. As the world held its breath, Ansa was waiting in the corridor. No casualties, she said. Data mines extracted. Every crime log, every voice suppression record. We're ready to drop the archive. But Sarah just held up a finger. Wait, one moment longer. Because this wasn't about proof anymore. This was about memory. The silence she gave them would outlast evidence. Because silence, when it follows truth, becomes holy, becomes legacy. And in that final pause before the storm broke, she whispered without sound, I was never voiceless, you just never listened. They laughed at her in courtrooms, in war rooms, in council chambers that smelled of smoke and conquest. They called her broken, called her ghost, mocked her silence, called her ruin in human form. And then they died, not by bullet, not by blade, but by something they never saw coming. Legacy. History has many weapons, and Sarah knew how to wield them all. She didn't need to destroy their bodies. She erased their names, tore down statues with facts, burned memoirs with testimony, flooded the archives with truth bombs, real names, real crimes, real scars. Across the world, cities renamed streets that once honored her enemies. Textbooks blacked out pages written in propaganda. Children grew up not learning about Commander Thorne, but about the orphan girl who outlived him, who defied him, who buried him, not in dirt, but in memory's graveyard. Because death comes twice, once when the body fails, and again when the world forgets your name. Sarah made sure they suffered the second. A statue once stood in Capitol Square, marble, 7 meters tall. It depicted Thorne with his fist raised, boots crushing a globe beneath him. Now, only rubble remained. In its place, a single bronze hand rose from the earth, small, feminine, scarred, open-palmed, offering, not taking. Below it, a plaque. She gave them back, their voice, no name, no date, just the truth. An entire generation grew up under the movement. Sarah ignited. They spoke with purpose, marched without permission, wrote their own laws in ink, made from the ashes of the old regime. And somewhere far from capitals, far from cameras, Sarah lived quietly, tending to the land, helping rebuild what the powerful had once destroyed. She never wrote a memoir, never gave a single interview. She let the silence speak for itself, until the day came when the Academy of Global Remembrance requested an audience. They wanted her to attend the unveiling of the Justice Epoch Archive, a living monument, one that held every suppressed file, every buried crime, every censored record, and at its center, a chamber, circular, lined with glass and light, no audio, no narration, just documents, her scar, just truth, and above the chamber door, the same one once used to shame her, now a sigil. The director greeted her with tears in his eyes. "We wouldn't be standing here if not for you." Sarah nodded once, then turned to walk into the archive. She moved past thousands of visitors who stood in reverent silence as she passed. No cheers, no photos, just stillness, because reverence doesn't shout, it listens. In that archive, children learned the names of the fallen, not the ones carved into gold, but the ones whispered through grief. Every victim given back their identity, every survivor given space, and above it all, a rotating display, a single phrase written in every language. They tried to erase her, but she erased them from history. In time, history books rewrote the end of the silence wars, not with tales of explosive victories, but with one woman's refusal to disappear, one woman's fight to be remembered on her terms. In one coastal town, a teacher asked a young girl, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" The girl smiled, loud, and somewhere Sarah smiled too. They once laughed at her silence, now their legacies burned beneath it, because the loudest voice in history was hers, and it never needed volume, just truth. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.